But what I've really done in my career is I've tried not to say no. And I think that has been the most helpful thing. Like, will you go and work this detail? Okay, doesn't sound like a ton of fun, but I'll do it, right? And what I've learned in saying yes all of those times is you learn a lot about how things happen behind the scenes when you say yes a lot.
What up, Black and Blue fam? Welcome to the Black and Blue Podcast, where we celebrate diversity in U.S. law enforcement. My name is Dale, and I'm the host. Just like it says right there, I'm the host of this show. And hey, thank you for everybody for joining me here today. But today is a very special, different kind of episode. This is Black and Blue Street Life. This is where I take the Black and Blue Podcast out of the studio and into the streets. And today I'm at a beautiful facility in one of the most picturesque cities in America, beachside community. So, but before I get to that, hey, make sure you like, subscribe, and share the show on any of my Black and Blue podcast platforms. You can find me anywhere at Black and Blue US. All right, so like I said, I'm in one of the most beautiful cities, and that being Manhattan Beach, California. I'm here with the Chief of Police here. So everybody, Black and Blue fam, please help me welcome to the show, Chief Rachel Johnson.
Thanks, Dale. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast.
Absolutely. How you doing today?
I can't complain. It's a Monday. It's the first really cold day in California this winter, but no complaints here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So tell me, how long you been here as a chief?
I've been there as a chief about 18 months. I started in August 2022, so finally getting my feet underneath me, finally know where places are when people refer to them. So it's nice to settle in, for sure.
Yeah, so you're a brand new chief, huh?
Brand new, yeah, showroom new, right?
Is this your first chief stint anywhere?
It is, yeah. I was provided a wonderful opportunity to come here and be the chief, and it is my first time, and I'm having a really, really good time.
Nice, nice. And where'd you come from before that?
So, this is my fourth police department, so I've kind of had an interesting career path. I was hired out of the military by the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and I worked there for a little over 4 years after the academy, working in the jails, training new deputies in the jail and things like that. I spent the bulk of my career at Newport Beach. I was there for a little over 14 years, was an officer there, a sergeant and lieutenant. And then my final stop before landing here was at the Laguna Beach Police Department, where I was a captain for about 2.5 years.
Nice, nice. And then where'd you do your military time?
I spent a year in Okinawa, Japan, and I spent 2.5 years in Miramar down in San Diego.
Nice. What branch was that?
The Marines.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Thank you for your service. So then you left that and you went to the Orange County Sheriff's Department. How was that?
Yeah, about 3 weeks after my enlistment was over, I already had an assignment to go to the academy, so that timing worked out really, really well for me, and had a really good time working for the sheriffs. I mean, we'll always be grateful for that first opportunity. In law enforcement, especially when you're new, you apply at several different departments, hoping someone will tell you yes, that they'll want you and you'll want them,
yes,
and that will come together. So I always be grateful for my first stint there, for sure.
Okay, but you had to do some time in the jails, and not everyone is into that sort of thing, right?
Well, I mean, the time in the jail was good. It was instructive for me. I was 23 when I got hired by the Sheriff's Department. I'd been in the military, sure, met lots of different people, but I'd never been in any trouble as a kid, and really I didn't know how to talk to people that were different than me, right? And so the jail was a really good opportunity at that age, being so young, to learn how to talk to people, to be able to really educate myself Because if you treat the inmates with respect, they'll tell you almost anything. And so developing relationships with them, developing a rapport with them where we could talk about the crimes they committed, why they committed them, and all those things, all that real inside information that was very helpful when I went to the field.
Yeah. I talked to a lot of deputies, and they tell me that that experience of talking with the inmates one-on-one
Right.
really helps them when they get out on the streets.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely helpful. Sometimes you recognize them as well, which is also helpful. Because at the time, at least when I was a deputy, you saw a lot of inmates repeatedly because drug possession of any sort of illegal drug was still a felony, so you still got arrested and went to county jail, at least for a little bit. So you saw a lot of people who aren't able to kick their drug habits. You saw them fairly regularly at the jail.
Okay. And did you grow up out here? Or?
No. I am from Houston, Texas. I grew up there. My whole family's there. And it's a wonderful place to be from. But you know, the insects are the size of birds, and the humidity is a real thing. And so I'd always wanted to live in California. And when I was stationed here for my last duty station, I tried to do what I could to make it my home and not have to go back home in Texas.
How often do you get back?
I get back once or twice a year. Just depends on the year. Luckily, I have a few relatives that come out and visit me as well. So I get to see them. But yeah, a couple of times a year at most these days to get back there.
Really? From Texas and didn't want to go back, huh?
Like I said, it's a great place to be from. The food is great. The people are great. The humidity, not necessarily that great.
Yeah.
And then financially for police officers, it's even though Houston's the fourth largest city in the country, they don't pay very well. Just historically in the state, in terms of making a good wage for the things that you are called upon to do as a police officer, they don't get paid as well as we do here. So certainly that was a factor as well.
Now, is it on a scale where they don't get paid for, because of course they're not going to make as much as they do as we do in California, but for the state, is it still, I mean, can you make a good living, or do you have to work 2 or 3 different jobs as well?
Well, that's what I always hear is, you know, when I have a couple of family members that are either in law enforcement or the fire service, and a lot of why they like what they do is it allows them to work extra jobs, because back there you can work, security at a nightclub or at a restaurant in your police uniform, even though it's an off-duty job. And so those opportunities are very lucrative for them back there. And I just I didn't want to always have to rely on secondary or tertiary income just to make a living.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see that as a liability. I don't know how they authorize it. It seems like a liability to me.
Right.
I had a buddy that worked out here for LA County, and he did a security job on the side and working at nightclubs, and he got into a big tussle.
Right.
And, when they see that you work somewhere else and they're going to sue, of course, they're going to sue. Yeah.
The deep pockets, right?
The deep pockets. So his investigators at the time, they cleared him, but they told him, hey, you got to make a decision.
Right.
You either want to work with us or you want to work over there. So of course he he gave up the security job. But
for sure.
I can't see how they allow that in those other places.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting for sure.
Yeah, definitely for sure. So then you came out here after you did your time in the military. How was Okinawa?
Okinawa was great. I requested to go from my school, my military school, to Okinawa as my first duty station. Had no idea what I was asking for, So I think I was 20 when I was there, and very interesting culture, very interesting people. I got my Japanese driver's license, learned how to drive on the opposite side of the road and the opposite side of the car, and so a really wonderful experience. And for me, I always tell people that the Marine Corps lived up to the commercial. I got to see the world, I got to do a bunch of different things. They certainly checked all the boxes on the commercial for me during my time there. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Have you ever been back since?
No, I would like to go back, but I haven't had the opportunity, unfortunately.
Do you like to travel, or?
I do like to travel, but I have kids, and so that's all my money, and my free time goes to them. So we do a lot of road trips and local things like that. But with 3 little kids, it just I can't jet set off to Europe like I'd like.
Okay. Yeah, I've been there, done that. My 2 are in college, so
nice.
we can go off and leave. I just tell you we went to Costa Rica. So,
right.
Yeah, so we can do that now that they're out and about doing their own thing. So
yeah, that's wonderful. I look forward to it.
One day you'll get there, Chief.
I look forward to it.
One day you'll get there. So you have 3 little ones, and you're doing that daily thing. How's that coupled with being a police officer? How's that work out for you?
Well, I mean, they're not so little anymore. They're 12, 15, and 17, but there's, I call them, they're homeschooled, and they're just like short college students, right? They think they know everything. They're eating all my food, eating me out of house and home. But they're great. They know what I do for work. And certainly if there's anyone to keep you humble, it's your kids, because they don't care that you're the police chief, or that I was a captain before. To them, I'm just their parent, and just someone, in the way of fun, right? And in the way of they're having a good time, telling them to do their homework or get off their computer and things like that.
Now, I noticed you said, excuse me, that they're homeschooled. So do they get a lot of social media? Are they allowed to look at social media, or?
They are allowed to look at social media. They have YouTube. I mean, they look at YouTube. They don't have their own social media accounts, unlike any of the more popular ones or anything like that. They have their friend groups, and that they, are in chats with their friends. But the blessing about them being homeschooled is that they're still kind of naive, if you will, about a lot of things. Like they know a lot about a lot if you ask them about world events, but they're not so into TikTok and other things like that. So that part's really not.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, because, with social media, excuse me, and, the media in general, our profession is not looked at too kindly nowadays. Has that rubbed off on them? Have they seen that influence, that mom works in the profession, but it's a profession that's not looked at kindly nowadays?
They've seen it, but the beauty of having them homeschooled and always talking to them about things, whatever that thing is that you can have like really good discussions, at an age-appropriate level, and kind of explain why people feel the way they feel about things, and have them have like a deeper understanding than maybe they would otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So then you said you were at the sheriff's department for a little while, and then you left to, where'd you go?
Newport Beach.
Newport Beach. That's a beautiful community.
It's a great community.
Yeah, yeah. How long did you do there?
Like almost 15 years. Had a lot of fun there. I was given a lot of opportunity. I worked in the office of the chief of police for a little bit in community relations. I worked in special events as a sergeant, was a crisis negotiator for a while, worked with our explorers and our mounted unit and our volunteers. So I had a really fun time there, a lot of opportunities, a lot of growth that I think put me on the path to be a chief, I think happened at Newport Beach.
How large is Newport?
They have about 149 sworn officers, and that's from officer to chief, and another 100 plus civilian employees. So not huge, but certainly not a small place.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. It gets a lot of action as far as people coming through there, tourists. I'm sure a lot of tourists come through there all the time. And we were talking about Kobe living there, Kobe Bryant living there, and all that sort of stuff. So I'm sure you've seen your fair share of stuff over there.
Well, the great thing, this is my third beach city in Manhattan Beach, working in Manhattan Beach, and the great thing about working in beach cities is that everyone comes to the beach. And so certainly you have people of means who live in the city, who live by the beach. You have, all manner of celebrities and sports figures that live in the city. But you also just have like regular people who hear about the city and want to come because it's a beach city and it's a beautiful place to be. And so as a police officer and working in the city, you just got all the full range of experiences, because there are, like I said, a lot of people of means that you would deal with on quality of life issues, but you would also deal with people who have criminal backgrounds, because they come to the beach too. So it's a super fun place to work.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of quality of life issues, a big one out here in California is homelessness. Did you see a lot of that over there? Do you see a lot of it here in Manhattan?
Well, I think a lot is relative, right? Certainly, from a human perspective, you don't want to see anyone on the streets, right? My heart breaks when I see people panhandling or or otherwise unsheltered, like from a human perspective. But working here and working in Laguna Beach and Newport Beach before that, while there were certainly people who were unsheltered in the city, in the grand scheme of things, were there a lot of people? No, there weren't. But one is kind of too many when you think of it from a human perspective, but that's also not a realistic perspective for what's achievable even under the best conditions with homelessness.
Sure. I just asked you that question because, say Venice, where you see a lot of that, and you would think that if you're unhoused, that maybe the beach would be a nice, the temperate weather and all that sort of, climate over there to be kind of conducive to, maybe being in a tent. So did you see a lot of that here? Or?
Well, it's certainly, when you with the beach, you're right. It's generally the weather is generally nice there. More often than not. There's sometimes showers so that people can rinse off at the beach, right? So there's at least a method to cleanse yourself or your belongings, and so certainly I can see why some people choose the beach over other places, just because it's a little more laid back. People are expected to hang out at the beach, so it's a little bit, I wouldn't say more acceptable, but I do think I understand why it's more attractive to people who are unsheltered for sure.
Yeah, when I was working patrol, like I said, I live and work out in the Inland Empire, and in the summer it can get up to 115, 120 degrees. And, when I speak to them one-on-one, I was like, why are you here? Why wouldn't you want to be out in the beach? But, I guess it's all relative to where, your situation is.
Well, that and what I've found in my years of dealing with the unsheltered is a lot of them go with what they know, right? And so people who are unsheltered in this area often have ties to the area. It's what's familiar to them. So they know where where they can get a sandwich, where they can get services. They know how to get to there from here. And so a lot of times what I've found is people tend to stay with what's familiar to them. And so that's what I think probably keeps people where you work as well,
True. All right. So then you went from Newport to Laguna, another beach community. How was that?
Well, I started, February 3rd, 2020. And so, the joke I've made since then is don't start a new job 6 weeks before a global pandemic, right? Because that's what I did.
Good advice.
I start there. It's, early February, it's all good. I'm a captain, have no idea what I'm doing, right? Just got the job. And we start hearing about COVID. And the city manager, we're in a meeting, and he says, well, Rachel, I want you to learn more about what's going on and help us out, right? And so I'm looking at him like, I don't even know the people's names in the room in this meeting because I'm so new. But now I'm gonna work on COVID. And so I actually spent about a year and a half working with the city manager on our COVID response and daily meetings talking about how this is impacting the business community, how it's impacting us internally in terms of our workforce, whether or not employees can ride together in the same car to conduct business of the city, and all these things. I spent about a year and a half being the COVID czar at Laguna. So it's just a really interesting experience because we were, building the plane while we were flying it, just trying to figure out different things and how to address things that were happening in the city every day that were related to the pandemic or the pandemic lockdown. So very interesting time there for sure.
How does Laguna compare to Newport as far as size of the city, size of the department, and activity?
So Laguna's area-wise about a third the size of Newport, had about a third of the employees as well. A lot of very similar activity just in terms of what happens at the beach and what happens in a city that attracts tourists and has a lot of tourist restaurants and things like that, where you deal with people overindulging in alcohol, you deal with some of the unsheltered, and you deal with quality of life issues. And so those things were very, very similar, and they're very relatable here as well, where we do have, obviously no one's immune to crime, and we have crime here, but a lot of our overarching community concerns have to deal with quality of life issues.
Yeah. So the three agencies you mentioned before, Orange County Sheriffs, Newport, and Laguna, those are all Orange County agencies.
Right.
And then now you find yourself up here in LA County. How's that transition for you?
It's been a lot of fun. What I was told before I was even considering a chief's job and certainly considering this job was, if you ever have a chance to work in the South Bay, you'll love it in the South Bay. It's a great time. And that has definitely been true for me. My surrounding chiefs have been awesome. The support that we receive and that we give is really great. And so for me, it's a best case scenario. I came to Manhattan Beach a lot in my off time before to eat and enjoy the restaurants that we have here. So for me, it wasn't unfamiliar. The city wasn't unfamiliar. When I started doing my research and learning more about the kind of issues the police department tackles, I thought it was very similar to what I'm used to. So it's been a great fit. But certainly it was a transition from having a lot of contacts at a lot of agencies in the county to really having to adjust and start fresh.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I said here in the intro about it being a picturesque city, it wasn't just a line. I mean, just driving up here and you can see the beach from the department, and wow, I mean, that's just amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, what kind of interested you to get into this profession in the first place? I know you said you were in the military, but you were in Okinawa and you were in places like that. What kind of sparked your interest to want to get into law enforcement?
I am one of those very rare people that this is the only job I've ever wanted. Like, I've wanted to be a police officer just forever, whether that was watching, T.J. Hooker or Cagney and Lacey back in the day, or other, police shows as I was coming up. Really wanted to be a police officer, really wanted to serve and be there for people. When I got out of high school, obviously too young to become a police officer, and so did a little bit of college. Really wasn't having a good time in college, probably wasn't mature enough. So that's how I ended up enlisting in the military. And I actually wanted to be a military police officer. That was the first job I talked with my recruiter about. And he says, well, you have to be 5'5". I think they had a height restriction at the time.
Really?
Yeah. And so he said, well, what else do you want to do? I said, well, let's see. And so we, at the time, they guaranteed you a job field. So you'd be guaranteed one of 6 jobs on your contract. And so I really wanted to do crash, fire, rescue. Sounded really cool, right? Put out, aircraft if there's an incident, and it'd be awesome, right? And what I got to do was something completely different, but still in that guaranteed field. So I was an air control electronics operator, which loosely translated meant that I talked to aircraft when they were in dogfights. So a little bit different than crash, fire, rescue, for sure.
Yeah, nice. So then you got into the profession, eventually. Has it been everything that cracked up to be before?
It's been more than that. I was able to, I had one enlistment in the military. I applied to be a deputy sheriff with Orange County about 6 or 8 months before I was due to get out of the military. As luck would have it, about 3 weeks after I got out of the military, I started the academy. And so it's been just everything I expected and more, because, obviously, having done this for as long as you have or as I have, what you see on TV, you take about 10% of that and take away the theme music and you expand the report writing and other things, and that's more realistic. But the opportunity when I was a police officer and a sergeant to really help people or impact a community problem, it's tremendous, right? And you can't get that in any other profession. And then as a manager, lieutenant, captain, chief, the opportunities I have internally to make sure my folks are ready for the next thing, make sure they feel prepared to take on new challenges and really invest in them is tremendous. And I really enjoy that. And then in working with the community as well, to tell our story and let them know how their police department is working for them are great. And so I could not have asked for really a better story.
For sure. Absolutely. So we spoke off air beforehand about, one of the reasons why I wanted to start the podcast. And I kind of told you that, 2020 was kind of the impetus in that. And I wanted to, show people that look like us that we have skin in this game as well and join the profession, not just complain from the sidelines. So we need more diversity in this profession. We're not there yet, but, we're working on it. What's the Manhattan Beach Police Department kind of look like as far as its community? I mean, you're a woman of color as well, but, what about the rest of your department and the community?
Well, I'm very proud of our department, and I can take almost no credit for it, right? Because I've only been here about 18 months,
right.
And it takes us quite a bit of time to hire someone. And so a lot of people that I've hired over the past year were, at least in the first half of my tenure, were already in our background process when I started, right? And so it's only, people that we're starting to see now or within the last 6 months are people that started the process when I was the chief of police, right? And so looking externally at our workforce is very diverse. We have a lot of people from very different backgrounds, people who speak a variety of languages, a very educated workforce. But we more like I said, I was a little bit surprised by how diverse we actually were, just in terms of where people are from and their skill sets and abilities. And I'm very proud of that work that's been done by those who came before me to set us up like this.
Is that kind of different from what you've seen before in the other agencies, or is that kind of like something that's the profession is working towards and we're getting better at it?
Well, that's an interesting question, right? At Laguna Beach, I saw a lot of diversity and a lot, there were a lot of sworn women who worked there and things like that, and that was a big push for the chief that hired me, Laura Farinella. Here at Manhattan Beach, we've had a number of different chiefs over the years. I mean, the chiefs that came before me, there's a woman, 2 men of color before me, and so we've had a lot of opportunities here, especially at the top and throughout our ranks, to really be reflective of the people we serve. I laugh a lot when I think about our hiring practices, because I think that who we hire is often a reflection of who our hiring personnel are, right? I had a colleague who really liked to hire baseball players, like people who played baseball in college or maybe played the minors and things like that. He just liked them. He felt like they had, good teamwork and things like that. And so for a little bit, when he was our hiring manager, we hired a lot of baseball players, and they all looked the same, right? And so I think it really depends on the outlook of your hiring person, for better or for worse. I don't say that in a negative way. What your department will look like, and also, how well what you're, as the chief, what I'm telling my folks are important, how well that's actually being relayed to our training team. Like, for instance, here with our training sergeant, he and I had a talk when I first started, and he was really just trying to see the threshold, my threshold for things, right? Does a person have to be a perfect angel to be hired here, or what am I looking for? And what I told him is I want good people here. I don't want to lower our standards, but good people make mistakes too, right? And there are certain mistakes that are, won't allow you to carry guns. We can't even talk about those folks. But, people who may have gotten in a fight in high school or something like that, okay, well, they're 25 now. Let's look at the whole person and see how they've matured and developed. And I find that when you do that, that really kind of opens up like who you hire, and that you have a workforce that is more reflective of where you live, or your community.
Right. Let's talk about that, because our profession has been taking a hit, and not a lot of people want to be cops nowadays. And so, are you having a hard time recruiting people? I know you say you don't want to lower your standards, but at some point we've got to recruit, because we need people out on the streets, right?
Right, and so certainly we are competing with similarly situated agencies for the same pool of candidates, and we call it a candidate pool, right? That's what we've always called it, but it might be a candidate puddle at this point, because it's small. It's small, and if we are looking at a candidate and we think they're qualified, you can bet there are at least a couple of other agencies that are looking at them as well. And so you're certainly competing for limited resources in a really interesting time in the profession. And so it's certainly tough, and it's something we focus on a lot here, is trying to do what we can to attract quality candidates who want to work in Manhattan Beach and want what we're about, in the face of a lot of other competing interests with hiring and things like that.
How does your department stack up against other agencies in the area, recruiting from the same pool of candidates?
I think we're doing well. I think we're at or better than most of our contemporaries around the South Bay. We're doing well, but it is something that I think about a lot, because just as soon as you get close to full staffing, or you get close to, that's when people start retiring, and we were just discussing this the other day. We have a number of people who could retire, right, from our sworn ranks as well as our professional staff. That doesn't mean they're going to, doesn't mean that's their plan, but they've reached minimum retirement age, and so you have to consider that in your succession planning and things like that. What am I going to do in 2 years when I might have this massive turnover at my supervisor and management ranks? And so it's constantly a consideration, trying to make sure, one, we have enough people to backfill for those folks, but then the people who can promote in those positions, that they're ready to promote and take on the next thing.
Right. So let's talk about you being a female in this profession. Me being a male, I know it's a male-dominated profession, but the 30 by 30 initiative is out there as well, trying to recruit more females into the profession. How's been your experience as a female? I know you were even in the military. What was that experience like?
Well, it's very different. Being in the Marine Corps, only 10% at the time of the Marine Corps was women, right? And I worked in the Air Wing, and so I was either there's either me and someone else in my unit, or just me in terms of women, which can be tough sometimes because no matter how great a boss you have, there's just things that they don't think about. When we reconfigured our office once, my boss was like, we can all just change in here. I'm like, no, we can't all just change in here. Like, I can't change in here with you guys, and I don't want to walk in here with you guys changing
Right.
clothes, right? So just sometimes things that people don't think about. And then the only time I've worked with a lot of women at once professionally was when I was assigned to the women's jail when I worked for Orange County Sheriffs, because that was mostly women with only a handful of men assigned in the facility. But since that time, it's been, just working with, my beat partners or whoever I was assigned. And it's been good. I can't say that it's been a negative experience, but sometimes it can be an isolating experience being the only woman on your shift or in your unit and things like that.
Do you ever find in your career that you were kind of pigeonholed into certain things and you had to break that mold because you were female? Does your sergeant at the time when you were on patrol, kind of gear you towards the sexual assault crimes or something of that nature?
Yes, is a short answer. And, what I found was like a friend of mine who promoted to sergeant right around the time I did, everything, I don't want to misstate it here, but things were not fun. Were all the things that kind of we were like pushed to do. Like, why don't you do this fundraiser? Okay, well, who wants to go ask for money, and then who wants to get people to volunteer to be there, right? Like very good things in terms of community events and things like that, but not fun, right? Not necessarily a good time in terms of all of the logistics and things like that. And so that was always just kind of what we did is like, was we asked certain people to do certain jobs. And what I really lucked out when I went to the chief's office, I had a sergeant who kind of really wanted me to work for him. And he allowed me to do some training, some detective training, some SWAT training and things like that, and really kind of opened people's eyes to who I was and showed me a lot about the department, which was very helpful to me. But what I've really done in my career is I've tried not to say no. And I think that has been the most helpful thing. Like, will you go and work this detail? Okay, doesn't sound like a ton of fun, but I'll do it, right? And what I've learned in saying yes all of those times is you learn a lot about how things happen behind the scenes when you say yes a lot. I was asked to write a policy. I was a police officer working in the chief's office. And my sergeant is like, well, you're not busy. Why don't you write this policy, right? Well, I've never written a policy. I was a police officer. I've never written a policy, But he allowed me to do it and allowed me to like kind of fail forward with it. And so then it's like, well, yeah, when something else like that comes up, it's like, well, I've done that before. Like, let me help you, or I'm happy to do it. And I found that I've said yes enough in different facets of my career that I have a lot of knowledge that's helped me be a chief. Right? I've said, yes, I'll manage that grant, or I'll do this thing, or I'll look into how we do this as a city and research this thing. And then you look around and you know a lot about how things work in the department when you are willing to say yes a lot of the time.
Yeah, writing policy, that's a big one, and that one and grants, because that's another big one in a lot of departments, OTS grants and all that sort of stuff. And you get that experience, that's gravy. That's gravy. Awesome. And did you learn a lot about politics of the city? Did you ever work with the city councils and all that sort of stuff before you became a chief?
I did. I got to work a little bit when I was in the chief's office with like school boards and the city council, just on minor things, which was nice. And I had a couple things not go so well, and so that was very instructive in terms of what you learn about how when things are politically sensitive, people start pointing fingers away from themselves, right? And so that was very instructive. for me as an officer. And then as a sergeant, I got to work in special events. And so working in special events, you're working with, the presidents of the chambers of commerce in your town on events, and you're working with Elks Lodges and all those community groups, as well as members of the city council on things and different department heads. And so all that stuff is really helpful in my path to chief. Just learning how to work with elected officials and how to make sure, like when you have an incidental contact with an elected official, that you tell your boss like pretty quick, like, hey, I talked to council member so-and-so, and this is what we talked about, and this is how we came to be talking. I just wanted you to know. So I was very fortunate to have those experiences, kind of organically throughout my career. So as a chief, I had a pretty good idea of, the dynamics of working with elected officials and things like that.
What's the transition been like for you being an external hire as a chief of police? What's that transition been like for you and your department?
Well, it's been a lot of plates because I don't know anybody's name when I start, right? And so for a long time in my office, I actually had all of our org chart with everyone's pictures in my office. And so when I would meet someone in the hallway and they'd tell me their name, I'd come back to my office. I'm like, okay, that was this person. That was trying to learn everyone's name. And so you're trying to do those little things, right? Because how long do you want to be like, hey, you, right? You want to be part of the organization as organically as you can and as quickly as you can. So, learning people's names, learning how we do things, trying to figure out where everything is. It's a lot at once, and at the same time, you're expected to be the chief, like from the beginning, right? And obviously people give you grace to learn things, and there's always that learning curve. But while you're doing all of the things just to try to learn how the organization works, you're also expected to still present to the community and talk about things that are important to them and be responsive. And so the first year plus was just, a sprint. It was definitely a sprint. I'm trying to get all of that done. I have two captains that report to me, and 2 months after I got here, I promoted someone to captain. So I have one of the two people that reports to me that's brand new in their job, and so trying to get them through learning their job while I'm learning my job. So it's been a real sprint so far.
Yeah. I know you said that part of your learning here was learning how they did things here in Manhattan Beach, but you as a chief, I'm sure you had your own ideas and wanted to do things a certain way. Have you changed any number of things since you've been here?
I've changed a few things, but one of the things I learned along the way is you can only change things at the rate people can accept them, right? Which is not quickly, especially not in a law enforcement organization, just because people are here for a long time and things tend to move at a pace, right? And it's that you can't come in and change 10 things in your first 100 days and expect that to go well. You can't change 2 things in your first 100 days and expect that to go well, depending on what you're going to change. And so really trying to see what we do, why we do it, before I make changes has been a big part of my first year. And then the changes I am trying to make, doing that in a way that people understand the why and people understand, why it's important. And that we have some room to okay, this is new and this is different and we're going to do it, but we may not be perfect for a while, and that's okay. And really trying to have my team understand that about me is that we're going to fail forward on things we've never done, but we will never get better at them unless we do them. So just trying to really promote that spirit of let's just try, let's see what happens when we do, and we will figure it out together.
Yeah, cops don't like change, right? Isn't it that old saying, cops hate the way things are and the way things are going to be?
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and so it's always what I find and hear and everywhere else I've worked, no matter what you do, communication is always an issue. Trying to communicate and over-communicate is really one of my big things is I tell my captains, we talk about it in command staff. We have command staff minutes that are published every week that we have command staff so the troops can read them. But even then with all of that, if there's something that's going on, I try to still notify them again. Like we have a bunch of our folks that are transferring on Saturday because that's shift change for us. And so we've made announcements over the last 3 months when this person is getting this and this person's getting that. After we've made decisions, we've made announcements, but we still put out a transfer list last week so that you can see where everybody's going on Saturday, in case you've forgotten, in case you didn't hear about it, but just trying to communicate as much as we can, because that's just one thing that every organization struggles with, and especially ours with different shifts and things like that. Some things just get lost.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you attribute your leadership style to? And what kind of is your leadership style? Did you kind of glean that from mentors in the past? What's kind of your leadership style?
Well, I am definitely not one to give a Braveheart speech, right? You know, we're not going to take the hill based on some speech that I give. I'm really about getting to know people and getting to know what makes them tick, and trying to explain from kind of their perspective, like what I think about the world, right? And, you know, I've had, you know, as I'm sure you've had in your career, a bunch of different kind of leaders. And what I've kind of taken my style from is just, our employees expect to know what's going on. They expect to be stakeholders in the police department. And which is unlike when I started, when you were just happy to have a job, and if they told you that you're working graveyards, you said, thank you so much for this opportunity to work every weekend this year. I would love it.
Right? Yeah.
And, you know, now our employees have an expectation, and rightfully so, to be part of what we are doing at the organization. And so I have really tried to not just, you know, go to all these leadership classes over the years, but take the important parts for me from them, you know, which are building stakeholders internally, you know, with your folks, not just telling them how things are going to go, but telling them why, giving them reasons why, and trying to build from there so that they have kind of an organic understanding of why we are doing what we're doing, and the plan in the end, right? So I spend a lot of time with that. I spend a lot of time trying to make sure that how it sounds in my head is what makes it out to my folks, because by the time it gets from me to the captain, to the lieutenant, to the sergeant, sometimes things can be lost in translation. So I spend a lot of time trying to make sure my folks hear from me about where we're going in the future. And so that's a kind of a long-winded-ish answer to, like, I really try to invest in our people and what we do here, because I really believe in it despite everything that's happened. I mean, my career, I graduated the academy 2 weeks after 9/11, right? So the job that I thought that I was going to get and the job that I got really changed, you know, in that period of time. And the profession has changed tremendously in that time, no matter how you look at it, from having to look at terrorism as a real thing, technology and how that's changed us. The profession has changed, and I really try to change with it and be what the team needs right now, you know, which is ushering us into what the future looks like. You know, leveraging technology to work for us, telling our story appropriately, engaging with the community, right? So that's kind of where I stand on, you know, how I steer the ship.
Yeah. It's funny when you mentioned that, you know, in years past that, you know, the culture of law enforcement was you take it like, you know, the graveyard shift for a year, and you like it, and you just do as you're told, because that's kind of the culture of law enforcement. It's funny because my wife works as a psychologist. She works for the county, and every day she'll come home and talking about, you know, her coworkers that, you know, that the county can't discipline because, you know, they do what they call in constantly every weekend, right, and the county can't do anything about it. And I'm like, that was being heard of in my profession. It's just because of the culture, I guess, of law enforcement, that, you know, you couldn't discipline an employee and eventually get rid of that employee. That's a bad employee. It's just a different dichotomy. But it's, you know, we're kind of changing that as well. You know, like you said, the younger generation has different expectations than we did coming up.
Yeah, they have a lot of different expectations, and quite frankly, not all of them are bad. You know, most of them are good. It's just in the profession, we almost reject it, right? Because it's change, and you know, and it wasn't how we had it. And what I really try to tell myself and encourage my team is, one, like, how we had it doesn't have to be the way it is, right? And it wasn't always great, and, you know, we didn't always like it. And so let's keep that in mind when we are thinking about how we address our newer generation of folks. Our newer generation of folks have got it right on work-life balance, and And they also want to be part of what we do here. They don't want to be that person that works a shift for 20 years that, no one really sees them. They want to be part of what we do here. And so we have to allow that. If we want to be an employer of choice and we want people to want to come here, we have to allow them to be stakeholders. We have to tell them what we value. We have to allow them to give us their input on it, and it has to be a constant team effort, right? Rather than the way it was when I started, where you were kind of told what to do and you did it without really questioning. And I think that sometimes that's not great. Like sometimes somebody needs to ask you questions, right, to make sure that your ideas are squared away and that we're moving in a good direction. So I just really try to encourage my team to, not leave a meeting with me and say, well, the chief said, well, okay, well, I could go tell people, if I wanted to do the chief said, I could go tell people that. I want you to say, like, this is our goal or our vision or our initiative. It's not just my initiative, it's our initiative, and here's why. We have to own this from the top down, because if we don't, then the employees aren't going to own it. So, just trying to have everyone, look at who we have, and we want to keep them. We desperately want to keep them, but also who we're trying to attract, right, as well. And that it's a different workforce. People are, sometimes balking at the idea of working weekends and nights and things like that. And so we can't do much about that. You got to work weekends and nights as a police officer, but we can't explain it to you. We can't talk to you about, why are you working weekends and nights, and how when you have enough seniority, you won't have to anymore. But certainly a lot more talking, a lot more making sure our folks understand, where we're going and why, than when I came up.
Right. Besides, that's where you get all the experience working weekend nights, right?
Yeah,
that's when
absolutely.
everything's happening, yeah. Mm-hmm. Where, I'm sure there are lots of bars and restaurants here in town, so,
Right.
Working weekends and nights, that's where you cut your teeth in the game, right? Yeah.
Truly. And in a city like ours, our calls for service are typically dwarfed by our self-initiated activity, from our team, which is great. Our team's out there working. But yeah, if you're going to work, weeknights, there's not as much activity as there are on weekends, especially, nice summer weekends, day shift or night shift. That's when you have those very memorable calls for service, and that's really when you learn how to do the job. And so, it's always good to spend some time on those shifts.
Yep. So, as a chief, what's the most rewarding part of your job?
The most rewarding part of my job is when I see my folks succeeding, right? Whether that's someone who wanted to be a police officer who had some setbacks in the academy, had to go back to the academy. Now they're in field training, right? That's a huge win for us. Or an employee who maybe had difficulty with public speaking, now giving great presentations to the community. Great wins, right? And then some of our longtime folks who a lot of time on, still out there, making good car stops and good arrests. And so I really enjoy seeing our folks grow and do well. That's the most rewarding part of the job for sure, is seeing our folks be successful.
And then on the flip side of that, what's about the most challenging part of your job?
I think the most challenging part is telling the story, right? And internally, telling my team the story of why we do some of the things that we are doing, just in terms of, when, we are beholden to legislative changes and directives of the court and things like that. We don't have a lot of control over that. And so what I try to tell my team about those things is we control what we control, right? We control our attitude, we control our effort, we control what kind of investigations we do. We don't control whether people stay in jail. We don't control whether their cases get prosecuted. We don't determine if those are state misdemeanors or felonies. Those are all out of our purview, and they have been forever, right? And so let's work on the things that we can control. It doesn't mean that I am not frustrated by those things, but let's control what we can control, right? And so trying to tell that story internally and talk about focusing on crime and focusing on our team and telling that story to everyone consistently the same way all the time. But then conversely, with our external stakeholders in our community, is telling our story as well. Every community, our community members want to feel safe. They want to feel informed about what we're doing, and trying to tell that story to them on an ongoing basis, where they understand what we do, but you're not scaring them, right? Is an ongoing challenge where I want to tell them, like, we're doing great work. I know the last time I counted, we'd gotten like 30 guns off the street and car stops, through November, right? Really excellent work for our team, right? And that's a story you want to tell. You want to congratulate your team members internally for that part of the story, but externally you want to talk about that. But the challenge with talking about that is I talked at a community meeting, yeah, we've gotten 30 guns off the street, and the response I got from a community member was like, how many did you miss, right? How many people came through the city, right, that we didn't stop that had guns? And so it's always a balancing act, trying to tell the story of the good work we do without having it have our community feel alarmed by the work that we do. In the last, handful of years or so, with technology and with platforms like Nextdoor, our community, they talk a lot more about things that are going on in town, right, than they ever did before. And so trying to talk to them about the things that they're hearing from their neighbors or seeing, and I'm not trying to discount anyone's experience, but a crime happens like 3 times on Nextdoor, like the same crime, right? Because 3 different, people will talk about it, and there'll be 3 or 4 different chat threads about it, and people can really feel like crime is exponentially increased. And certainly we've had our ebbs and flows with crime, but we're near even our 20-year historic averages in terms of crime are much lower. But for a community member, they're hearing about it 3 separate times, right? So it feels like that crime occurred 3 times, and the crime's through the roof. And a lot of it is really our awareness has increased. Our awareness of things and our ability to communicate our awareness to others. 5 or 10 years ago, if you saw a police car going by, lights and sirens, you're just like, I wonder what that's about. Well, now you can get on a social media platform and you can say, I saw 3 police cars go by, I wonder what that's about. And you'll get 20 people to speculate with you, right, on what has happened, right? And so trying to tell our story externally where you're validating what people are hearing and seeing, because I don't want the community to feel like I don't believe them, but also that against the backdrop of the data we have and the numbers we have on our crimes is always just a balance, trying to really tell that story appropriately and make people feel heard and listened to, while also understanding the actual nature of our crime problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all that, technology that we have today, how does your department leverage that social media, Ring, Nextdoor, all that sort of stuff into your operations to make the community safer?
So, great question. We try to take it all in. Like our social media team, which is just a team of our line employees, both sworn and professional staff, do a great job with pushing out information to the community, whether it's, a stolen vehicle that we're able to stop and arrest the driver, or other noteworthy calls for service that we have, or even fun stuff that we do when, like, we open an ice cream shop in town. Yeah. Like they do a great job of trying to tell our story and talk about what we do. Excellent work. They're very passionate. They're very motivated. My public affairs team, our community affairs team, which includes our PIOs, like, we try to monitor things like Nextdoor and really not step in unless there's real false information being presented. Because it would be too much work to try to do that all the time for the number of people we have. So we try to monitor what we're seeing on Nextdoor and what we're hearing, and if there needs to be some sort of correction made, we'll make it. But we just try to use that to keep on the pulse. We put out updates every week about what's going on in the city, and so if we're seeing something on Nextdoor, we try to address it in the next week's update. So talk about that crime trend and talk about those questions, but really trying to make sure we're hearing what people are curious about, and that we're responding to that very quickly wherever possible. We've had some distraction thefts in the city, which no city's really immune to those. But if we start hearing about them on Nextdoor, the next thing is let's start posting about them in our weekly updates to make sure that our community knows that we're experiencing a resurgence in this particular trend. We have a crime analyst who does a really good job of kind of telling us trends and what she's seeing. And so over the time that I've been here, I've really tried to leverage her to, talk to our team like on a weekly basis about the crime trends that she's seeing, any information she has about anything that can help us catch these folks. And then we've had some successes. We've had some great successes with her saying something as simple as these seem to happen on Tuesday and Wednesday nights. And then you have some officers out on graveyard Tuesdays and Wednesday nights, and they are able to catch people, stealing catalytic converters and things like that. So we've had a lot of success with that. We're trying to find more ways to leverage the information that we collect anyway to get it out to our folks so that they can make, nearish real-time decisions on where they're going to focus their efforts in a day. So we're continue to work on that. And then from the community side of things, I've been working for the last handful of months on a dashboard, which I'm hoping to get up by the summer, that will allow our community members to see the status of calls after they've closed. So if you're, curious about something that happened, at Walk and Don't Walk, once that call's closed, you can look it up and say, oh, it was, a disturbing the peace call, that resulted in an arrest. So we're working on that. It's, first we had to get the data and figure out how we're going to parse the data. So it's a process, but I'm hoping that will also help us with the storytelling I'm talking about with our community. Because I think one of the big things that we've learned over the last 5 to 10 years with all the social media is that people, I think, did not know how many calls for service we get, right? And so sometimes when we have a complaint about our timeliness on a call, or sometimes a sentiment of, said very bluntly, what else do you have to do but handle this problem? It's like, well, we get about 100 calls a day, on a low day and 150 on a high day, and trying to explain that to a community member, right, that it's not just this thing that you're seeing in front of you that's happening, or this thing that happened to you, is that we have competing priorities throughout the day, and that while in the terms of the grand scheme of things, we don't have a lot of calls for service, we're busier than you think we are, than you might think, oh, Manhattan Beach. I mean, it's my third beach city. I've heard all the beach jokes by now about how easy it is and all those things. And what I always tell people, I'm like, you're working here in Beach City X, and, how bad could it be? And I was like, well, when I took my aunt for a tour of the city, driving her around, and every place that she said, oh, that is so beautiful, sweetheart. I'm like, oh yeah, I got in a fight there, and this guy ran from me there, and, I had a pursuit start here. And so for, even in towns that are as picturesque as this one, like I said, everybody comes to the beach. And while we have a very low violent crime rate, and, our city is very safe, things still happen. And I think that that's part of that storytelling, is trying to tell our community that things, you're safe, but things do still happen here.
Right. Well, they're safe because of the PD,
right?
I always tell people, because my city has a similar kind of atmosphere about it being safe as well. But I tell people that, but criminals have cars, and they come to our community because we have nicer things.
Right.
They come here to burglarize and steal, and we as a police department, we are the front line against that. So it's safe for a reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's always, like I said, that storytelling where it's like, the officer, we had an officer maybe a week ago, sees a suspicious car in the structure at the mall and goes out with it. And all of a sudden, as he's going out with the car, some people start running with merchandise towards the car, right? I can't tell that story enough. He was just on a patrol check, saw something suspicious and acted on it, right? And lo and behold, the arrest came to him, right? But that's the great work that our people are doing on an ongoing basis. And it's really, as I try to tell as many stories as I can, but you can't tell them all, right? But tell her, this is we hire great people here, and because we do hire great people, that's why he's, where he needed to be when the crime occurred.
Yep. And speaking of stories, you've got a long breadth of career, where you've done different things. Talk about an incident, say like when you're with the family and they say, hey, Rachel, tell us about a cool thing that you've done at work, and a story that you always bring up. I know it's not all about the car chases and running through houses and all that, but there's got to be a cool story somewhere, right?
Well, I think a lot of what we do, it's cool in retrospect. I don't know if you've ever heard of the types of fun. Like type 1 fun is fun in the moment, right? And type 2 fun is fun after the fact. Like you run a marathon, and in the moment it's very challenging, but at the end you're like, I am so proud of myself. Like type 2 fun. And then type 3 fun is fun that is never fun, right? It's running into Loch Ness. It's never fun, right? But we got through it, right? Yeah, yeah. And so I think a lot of the work that we end up doing here can be type 2 fun. Like in the moment, it's a little stressful, but when it's over, you're like, well, I mean, we did a good job, or something like that. And so I had the occasion for a handful of months to be a part-time observer when we had a helicopter. We used to share, when I worked at Newport Beach, a helicopter with the city of Costa Mesa. And so I was a part-time observer for just a little bit, and I was calling out a pursuit, right? And pursuits in the police car are really fun, right?
Right.
But in a helicopter, they're super cool.
Pursuit, what is that? Do they still do those things now?
We do still allow them, but this was back in the olden days.
Okay.
And I'm watching the pursuit go, and I'm watching it go, and the pilot's like, hey, just so you know, this road is ending, right? And so we tell the officers, and they back off, and it was like a car theft suspect or something like that. And it's a parade of police cars, because this was a long time ago, where we didn't necessarily have all the technology we have to tell us how many people are actually in a pursuit. And so it's a conga line of police officers. I tell them the road's about to end. The crook ends up giving up, but I'm thinking, because of the station it came out of and the number of cars that are following this thing, like, this must be like a hardened criminal, right, that committed this crime. And this woman gets out of the car, and she's older, and she's in what would be described as a muumuu. And I'm just asking myself, like, do we have the right car? It was an assist other agency, so I never found out the end, but it's one of those things where if I'm looking for a theft suspect or a robbery suspect, this isn't that person. And it was really funny. And at the time, because I'm looking in my binoculars, I'm like, okay, they got her, but not what I was expecting, like that someone's mom would be, popping out of the cars, being pursued by all these units and things like that. But the job's always been fun. Sometimes, like I said, just fun is relative, but I've had a lot of really good opportunities.
Okay. Yeah, our job is unlike any other, and you always have those stories and those memories once you retire, the camaraderie, all that sort of stuff. It's unlike any other job that, working in an office or anything. Even our partners at the fire department,
right.
They say, "What did you do today?" "Oh, we poured water on a fire." Or
right.
We get to do some pretty cool stuff.
No, I always tell people the job's like a box of chocolates. And most days, it's the ones you want, right? Which I just want milk chocolate. I'm a purist. Just give me milk chocolate. Yeah. But some days, it's the one with that weird coconut in it. And you're like, well, put this one back, right? But yeah, certainly the things that you see and the experiences that you have, you can't replace them. And, when I talk about storytelling, when I'm talking to the community about the work that we do, I'm always trying to explain to them that we go to the academy, we have field training, but our officers are dealing with humans every day. And so, every domestic violence is not the same. Every car stop is not the same. And so our officers are doing the best that they can do when the script is being written for them as it's being acted out. And so, that means that they're making decisions on the fly, and we should give them some grace. But also, have that understanding is that the officer doesn't know what they're getting into when they're getting into it. And that we're responding to situations and really trying to tell that story where, well, why do they do this? And I'm like, well, I wasn't there, right? And I'd have to ask a lot more questions to be able to answer that intelligently. But I can think of 3 right now why I would have done it based on what you've told me. So always trying to tell that we require our teams to know so much. We require them to get through the academy and learn all of the basics of police work, all of those penal codes, vehicle codes, all of those things. We get them out in field training. We require them to learn the city and apply what they learned at the academy. And then we have all this tech in the cars, and we want them to learn that too and be good at that too and leverage that for themselves. And so we ask our people for a lot more than they asked when I started. And, and to try to keep that in mind when someone does an A+ job, but maybe misses a few things on something, is that we're asking humans to react in the moment, and they have to know so much all the time. It's just not easy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And going back to when you said where you were an observer, was it Huntington Beach that lost a helicopter not that long ago?
Yeah, Huntington Beach lost a pilot. Was a year before last, which very, very tragic incident.
And condolences to your department for losing the motor officer.
Thank you.
A few months back, right?
Yeah, that was tough for us. I mean, it's still tough for us. I had to talk a lot about Chad, the month that he passed away. And I always wonder, right, when you hear officials talking about people, especially when they've passed, like, is that person like talking them up a little bit because, they're no longer with us? And the beautiful thing about Chad was I didn't have to talk him up. He was funny. He got in a scrape every now and then. He didn't take himself too seriously, and he's a hard worker, hard worker, and he had a good perspective on life. And so to lose anyone is tough, but to lose someone like that who, he was at the floor of his career. He had nowhere to go up, nowhere to go but up. He had so much ceiling, so much potential, that he was only starting to realize. It's just really, really tough on the organization. We're, so small. He had a lot of friends here. And so it's been definitely something for our team to really have to try to make our way through the grief.
Yeah. Again, condolences
to
you and your family here at Manhattan Beach. So yeah. And before I get you out of here, how about some words of advice for anyone that's aspiring or just getting into the profession?
One, have a good time. This career is supposed to be a long one, right? You play your cards right, you do 20, 30 years. Have fun. Don't rush. Don't be so focused on the next thing that you don't enjoy the thing that you're doing. I made it to chief in a relatively short amount of time, all things considered, but I really always concentrated on enjoying what I was doing now and not necessarily how that was going to impact my resume. So enjoy yourself, have a good time, be a student of the profession, learn why we do what we do, learn our history so you can grow from it. But more than anything, never forget what this job is about, right? And certainly internally, the job's about taking care of your people, taking care of the people who sit next to you in briefing and the people you work with every day. But we are in service to the people, right? And sometimes that can be very frustrating to deal with. If there's a hot button issue that's shining a bright light on the department, that can be challenging. But we are in service to them, and so we do owe them our very best. And so it's okay to get frustrated. It's okay to get down on things, but remember, they're why we exist. And if you keep those things kind of in perspective, have a good time, enjoy the moment, and remember why you took the job, I think you can't go wrong.
Absolutely. Great words of advice there for anybody aspiring to get into it. I know you said you had three ones at home. Do any of them want to be like you and get into the profession too, or?
Well, I think that I have, most of their childhoods, I've been at least a sergeant. And so I think that I have kind of spoiled it for them because they see me staying late for meetings or doing this thing or that thing.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that they think that my job is very fun. And so at this present time, none of them want to get in the business because I think they don't want to go to meetings and write memos, right? And so I think as they get older and we're able to talk a little bit more about kind of I wasn't always a manager. I wasn't always a supervisor.
Right.
I was a line police officer working graveyard patrol, talking to people on the side of the roadway. And I can see my youngest all wanting to get in the profession, but my older two, I think that they're going to go the way of, IT or working. I think my middle child might work as a naturalist or something like that, something more outdoorsy.
Okay, all right. Well, hopefully in the future that we can inspire someone to get into this profession because we need some more good cops.
Absolutely.
100%. All right, Chief. Hey, I appreciate you.
All right, thank you so much.
Allow me into your beautiful facility here. I'm going to go take a walk out there on the beach and take a look at it. All right.
Awesome.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.
All right. All right, fam. That's it for this Street Life edition of the Black and Blue Podcast. I want to thank Manhattan Beach, California Police Chief Rachel Johnson for allowing me to sit down with her in the Chief's office of Manhattan Beach PD. And I hope you guys liked watching and listening to this episode as much as I did making it. If you did, hey, go on ahead and let me know by leaving a comment down below. I'll be back in another couple weeks with another hot episode, but till then, y'all know the phrase that pays. Stay black and blue. I'll holler at you. I'm out.
This has been a Maitre D Entertainment presentation.